Welcome to the Power of Play in partnership with Athleum Sports, where sport is more than just a game, it's a force for change. I am your host, David, and in this podcast, we explore on how businesses and organizations use sports to achieve positive social and environmental impact, and how the sport industry itself can become a frontrunner in social, environmental, and economic sustainability. I'm thrilled to be joined by my guest today, Michael Rice, who is the operational manager at AccessibAll. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, David. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you for being with us. Please, you have a really amazing story. Please tell our audience who you are, what's your background, and how you joined this magnificent initiative.
So I think first and foremost, and something that we find with many disabled fans as well, was I am a football fan. It's a sport that I'm passionate about and means a lot to me in my daily life. I was a law student going back a few years, took a particular interest in equality law, and in particular the impact on the legal aspects of the law on disabled people as a whole. So something that I was keen to explore a little more as I left my studies and went into the employment sphere. I was also working within football at the time, so looking to find something that really brought the two passions together. And I managed to discover the organisation that at the time was called CAFE, the Centre for Access to Football in Europe. We're now known as AccessibAll, and I'm sure we'll discuss a bit more during the episode about that change and our new approach as an organisation. But on a personal scale, I'm not disabled myself, but it is something that I do take a particular interest in and have background in. So as I mentioned, I'm a keen football fan, and like most people, I started to go and watch football at a very young age, along with my dad. He was non-disabled as well. We'd go and watch our team home and away. More often than not losing because we're not one of the better teams, but it was still a memorable experience to be sharing that day with my dad. As he got into his 40s, he had cancer and effectively became disabled then. He used a wheelchair for the last 11 months or so of his life. And one of the key changes that he discovered was that he could no longer go to the stadium with me. We couldn't sit in the seats we used to sit in. And he felt really that a huge chunk of his life had gone. And likewise for me, watching on as a 12-year-old boy, seeing this happen to his dad, it had a massive impact on me, but also that side of not being able to go to the match with my dad, not to do the things that we did do together. So whilst he was ill, we got in touch with our club, and they couldn't do enough in terms of bringing him to the training ground to meet the players. I remember it was the first time in many months that I'd seen him smile again, just to see the players and the manager and be part of that club. And we did manage to get him to one more match as well, which had a huge impact on him, but on the entire family, really. We saw such a change in him, and it really did mean the world to us to see the impact that a live football match had on him. So the work that we do now, I'm really keen to sort of replicate that feeling with so many more people. We know what impact live football can have on people's lives, and those memories that I got that day will stick with me forever. And I'm sure that's just one story in terms of countless many more from disabled people and their family and friends across the world.
The title of our show is called The Power of Play, and you have really hands-on experience with this title. Can you share a bit what this means to you?
Yeah, I think we look at football, the entire sporting industry, but football in particular has a very key role to play within that. Football is the world's most popular sport. More people than any other interest, really, not just sports, but outside of music, or culture or museums. There's more football fans in the globe than anything else, I'd say, really. So we do know it has that massive impact that can really be harnessed and to be utilized for much greater things. The work that we do, quite often we're looked at as looking to improve the situation within football. I look at it as a slightly different way, that we're trying to take the power that football has to really change people's lives. That's disabled people, their family and friends, but that's not just for the 90 minutes of the game. That's a full 7 day a week impact that we can have purely through football. It isn't just about what happens in the stadium, but football can influence so much more. We've seen political changes come about as a result of pressure from football players or football fans. But at the same time, the football fan base as a whole really does come together to support their fellow fans as well. And it's something that we're really, really passionate about, that football can have such a huge cultural impact away from the game, not just what happens inside the confines of the stadium.
I've collected some statistics around the topic that you're dealing with, and just to bring up some numbers, there's 1.3 billion people with significant disability, which is 16% of the entire population, equaling to 1 out of 6 person, 240 million of them being children, 1 out of 10. The Disability Center data, which is a UK data, says that 52% of sport fans were deterred from attending sport events due to inadequate accessibility. And the level playing field mentioned the number that 8 out of 10 football fans have encountered discrimination. And 62% of those stated that they would not return to a live match again. In this context, can you please introduce to our audience what AccessibAll is all about and what challenges it tackles?
Yeah, so disabled people constitute the largest minority group in any society and across the globe. Some of the different estimates you mentioned then, that there's also additional resource out there where up to 25% of people at any time require good access. So although they may not be disabled themselves, they have a requirement for good access, which could be an injury or temporary disability, or it could be a pregnant supporter, for example, or
We use the term disability a lot.
yeah.
What does, in a very simple, most simplest question, what does disability mean, or who is considered to be disabled?
Yeah, so d disability, we've got a few different ways of looking at this. What's known as the social model and the medical model of disability, and they take two quite different approaches to that. So the medical model is very much based around the word impairment. It's something that we don't tend to use at AccessibAll, and it looks at the disabled person in terms of a disease or a condition that they may have. So, for example, if you have, let's say, motor neuron disease, then you're disabled. The social model looks at it a slightly different way. So, social model is the model that we subscribe to at AccessibAll, and this looks more at the barriers that are in place within society that prevent a person from an equal experience or an equal opportunity. So, you'd look at a disabled person, and let's take, for example, a wheelchair user and myself as a non-disabled person. Ultimately, we're both just two people and we could be going down the street together, not an issue. The wheelchair user becomes disabled then when the only route into a stadium, for example, might be up a set of stairs. So that'd be a physical barrier that would effectively disable somebody. Similarly, there's educational barriers, operational barriers. One of the points that you touched on earlier around the experiences of disabled people inside stadiums and discrimination that some have experienced, the attitudinal barriers that we look at, and they can sometimes be the most damaging of all. So a physical barrier, we can look to improve or change the infrastructure. A intellectual barrier, we can look to implement a service or a new facility that would be there to support somebody. But the attitudinal barriers can often be the most damaging, because even if we're able to change somebody's mindset or the way that people look at disability and consider a disabled person, it's already had its impact then and really diminished the confidence that that disabled person may have. It's never nice to feel unwanted in a stadium or anywhere within society. So those barriers all play a key role in disabling a person. But yeah, we certainly find more often than not that those attitudinal barriers can be the most damaging and long lasting for many people.
And this is basically what you're combating at AccessibAll.
Exactly, yeah. So our belief is that the game truly is for everybody, and no one should be left out in any way, whether that is because of a physical barrier or operational or attitudinal. So we look to remove those barriers so that the disability of a person effectively just becomes another part of their characteristic rather than something that they're defined by. Uh, Myself and a wheelchair user and a blind person and a deaf person should all be able to go to a stadium and enjoy a positive experience. So that's what we're really trying to do there, to ensure that everyone does have that equal chance and opportunity to play a key role within the sport that we all love so much.
I find it super inspirational. And you mentioned at the beginning that originally you were called Coffee, and recently you rebranded to reflect a broader vision for accessibility in sports. What prompted this change, and how has it influenced your organization's direction?
Yeah, so the organization was created in 2009 in partnership with UEFA. The need had been identified following previous finals and tournaments for greater support for disabled people wanting to attend live matches, but also support for the football institutions who wanted to address this topic. So, in partnership with UEFA, CAFE, the Centre for Access to Football in Europe, was established. And we've worked together closely for over 15 years and continue to develop that relationship further year on year. We've seen enormous strides as a part of that relationship and continue to change the image of football and the opportunities for disabled people within that. From the learnings that we've taken from that partnership with UEFA, those works have naturally extended outside of Europe now. So we've been engaging with FIFA over a number of years, looking at different tournaments in 4 different continents so far, offering our support, our expertise, but most importantly, our experience of issues that have been addressed and dealt with in the European sphere. So we quickly identified while there is still work to be done in Europe, this work can be replicated across the globe. So we had Europe in the title and we had to remove that to show that we're now a truly global organization. And likewise, we had football in the initial name. And although we are still primarily working within football, again, the learnings that we've taken during this time really can be taken and replicated in any sport or any arena, even outside of sport, looking into, for example, concert halls. There's no reason why some of the learnings and the experience that we've developed over this time couldn't be replicated there as well. So our focus still remains sport as a whole, hence the ball in the AccessibAll name. But we're not just limited to football, and we're very much open to working with sports, including non-ball sports as well, to really take the experiences of these past 15, 16 years to help to improve the experience for all sports fans.
Diving a bit more into the mission and initiatives part, what does a complete fan journey for a disabled football fan look like today on a match day?
Yeah, so quite often we think of match day and we think of the referee blowing the whistle at the start of the game and then blowing again at the end, and that's the match. But there's so much more that goes into that, that especially many non-disabled people may take for granted sometimes. So if we take, for example, the experience of a disabled fan wanting to attend a match, let's say an away match, where it's a stadium that they're not as familiar with and may not have visited before. So the research that needs to go into that starts weeks and weeks before the match, really, before the disabled person even really decides if they are going to that match. There's a lot for them to consider in terms of, can they get there in an accessible way? That could include air travel. It could include long distance trains, buses, and there's a lot of different access requirements that can be impacted by those different modes of transport as well. Many disabled people cannot travel by themselves, particularly on air travel. So it is important for them to also find a companion or a fellow friend or family member to come with them also. Then we could look at, say, hotel rooms. There's already a very, very small percentage of hotel rooms that truly are accessible for disabled people. And we quite often find that those rooms aren't necessarily held back for disabled people always. They'll just be allocated out as soon as somebody tries to book a room there. So what's already a very small number of rooms becomes very, very difficult for a disabled person to then secure that accessible space that they need. Um, then we look at the local public transport. Is there a way that they can safely and comfortably get to the stadium on match day? Um, Also, in terms of ticketing, that can be a big, big issue for many disabled people. If you look particularly as an away fan, you want to be sitting alongside your fellow supporters with your team the same way anybody else would who supports your side. And for a number of years, it's been an issue that disabled people have raised with us when they have gone to attend matches that they felt secluded or separated in some cases. It is something that football is getting a lot better at now in terms of putting accessible seating options in the away end as well as the home end. But again, something that can really deter many disabled people from actually attending that match. So the work on match day starts a long, long time before the match itself. Even then, when we get to the stadium, we need to consider accessible entrances, whether there's a way that a disabled person can independently and comfortably enter the stadium, how they get around the stadium, around the concourses inside. Can they get their own food and drink while inside the stadium? Can they use the club shop? Is there an accessible toilet for them? And this is all before they've even had a view of the pitch. Ultimately, then we're on a match day because we want to see the match. So we have to look at how the disabled person sees that match. Are the sight lines sufficient? Are they going to see the back of somebody's head because they've stood up in front of them the entire time? Is there a place for that disabled person to really and truly enjoy that match as well? So there's a lot that goes into the match day experience, and ultimately, a lot of it takes place before the actual match day itself. We then look at leaving the stadium, and again, this is something that many will take for granted. When you enter a stadium, it could be broad daylight and very easy to identify where to go. Also, on a match day, people enter the stadium at different times, so it won't necessarily be the busiest time for disabled people to enter. Whereas at full time, everybody's leaving together, so there's a huge rush of people to leave the stadium. It could be dark outside now and a lot more difficult for a disabled person to not just navigate where they're going, but to really know where to go as well. So things like signage inside and outside of the stadium can also play a huge role. Likewise, volunteers and stewards have a big role to play on match day in terms of identifying when a disabled person may need some support and being there to offer helpful advice and guidance also.
You guys are tackling an amazingly difficult and complex topic just out of what you just mentioned. Where are your biggest challenges and where do you see the biggest opportunities in your activities?
Yeah, so I think the one of the biggest challenges that we've had for a number of years is really how we change people's mindsets and how people look at disability as a whole, but disabled people themselves as a key part of that. And for too long, disability and the role of disabled people has been looked at not just in the sporting sector, but in society as a whole as a charity case that disabled people are kind of really an afterthought when it comes to the overall match day operation, for example. Uh, Disabled people are looked at sometimes in a way that we focus on what they can't do and what they can't bring to the table rather than what they can do. And there's so much that disabled people can bring to the game, not just as fans, but as employees, as volunteers, as stewards, and as leaders and decision makers ultimately as well. The most impactful leadership groups are ultimately a diverse group. And we mentioned earlier, disabled people make up a huge percentage of the global population. So it's only right, really, that disabled people's voices are heard in that regard as well. But ultimately, a lot of the time, disabled people have been allocated a, let's say, a lesser experience sometimes because the value of a disabled person hasn't necessarily been understood by the event hosts. Disabled people as a whole now have a um, higher value to society than ever before in terms of monetary value, as well as the roles that they can play. The spending power of disabled people globally nowadays, estimated by the World Health Organization, is around $13 trillion. That's an incredible figure when you consider the role that disabled people, but also their family and friends can play there also. They are the most loyal fans and supporters that many clubs will ever have in terms of the obstacles that they have to jump through in order to get to a stadium that we spoke about earlier. Disabled people will be there, rain or shine, to support your team, but they don't need to be looked at as an afterthought or as a charity case. Disabled people have a true value to the game in a business sense as well as a moral sense. So we're really trying to change that mindset that we don't need to just necessarily allocate free tickets or give disabled people a lesser experience so they'll be happy with what they've got. There's a real case to be made here to look at disabled people as a largely untapped market for stakeholders within the game to really embrace and welcome to the stadiums as well. There's a key role there that we're really keen to use sport to illustrate and bring disabled people into a greater place within society. And I think that ties in quite nicely with the opportunities that are ahead of us because we touched earlier on the fact that not many disabled people still feel confident in being able to attend a live sporting match or a live public event. In some societies, that's as high as 50% of the disabled population have never experienced that live gathering of a match or a concert or an event like that. So there's a true opportunity here to shape our game to be the way that we want it to be, that truly it does encompass everyone within society. And it doesn't always necessarily mean we have to knock down the stadium and rebuild it in our image as well. We can make quite small changes that can have a huge, drastic impact sometimes. But absolutely, the thing that we can change that'll have the biggest impact will be people's mindsets.
As a resulting question comes that Accessible emphasizes total access in live sport experiences. Can you elaborate on this concept and its significance in promoting disability inclusive change?
Yeah, so I think the two key words that really come to mind when I think of our total access motto is opportunity and independence as well. So if we look at opportunity, disabled people want to experience live football and live sport in the same way that anybody else does. And in some cases, that may mean that only a very small area of the stadium may be accessible. So that's something that we're trying to do to improve, to give that opportunity of choice again, so disabled people can experience the entire stadium, the entire match day. They don't need to be grouped in a particular area, for example. It's about full access to the stadium to watch the match. We touched before on being able to use the club store to get food and drink inside the stadium as well. It's about so much more than what happens on the pitch on a match day, and that's that total experience that we really talk about through total access. And likewise, independence. A lot of disabled people often do find that that independence is something that is not always readily available for them, and more often than not, they do have to rely on support from other people, and whether they necessarily want it or not. So disabled people, just like anybody else, we do thrive on that independence, and we embrace the fact that we can do things by ourselves. And although disabled people do typically go to a match alongside a companion or a fellow friend or fan or family member, it's important to have that independence there as well, so that they really do feel valued and as a part of the wider fan base and the society and industry as a whole. I've found so many times that we've spoken with many disabled people who have become disabled later on in life. So they've experienced life as a non-disabled person, and they can just book a flight or just jump on a train or just go and buy a ticket for a football match. Whereas for a disabled fan, it can be a very much different story. Quite often, assistance has to be pre-booked days or even weeks in advance to travel independently. To buy a match day ticket, again, there's a lot more to take into consideration. They can't just turn up at the stadium more often than not and buy a ticket on the day. It's something that has to be dealt with over a period of time coming up to the match day. So what we try to do is to work with stakeholders in the game to really get rid of that divide in the matchday experience between disabled fans and non-disabled fans. So looking at the way that non-disabled people interact with their football stadium or their club or national association, and trying to ensure that disabled people have that same opportunity there as well. So that could be, for example, the chance to buy your tickets online. In some cases, disabled people still can't do this when it comes to buying a match ticket. but also just looking again around the stadium, so disabled people really can interact with that stadium by themselves, and that's including things like ramps, for example. Good signage is key to this also, and the services that you can put in place. So not necessarily just thinking about wheelchair users, but a service such as audio descriptive commentary can have a life-changing impact for so many blind and partially sighted people who maybe felt that they couldn't go to a stadium. What would be the point of us going to the stadium even if we can't see or hear the match? So it does have that massive impact, but likewise, it doesn't mean that they necessarily need someone to be there explaining everything to them along the way. Then they can independently enjoy the match right alongside everybody else. And ultimately, I touched on it earlier. That's what this is all about. We're all football fans first and foremost. We're all passionate about the same topic, the same club, the same match, and we should all be able to enjoy that in the same way.
And this was for me the perfect lead in to the next question, which is accessible is very much based on your explanation about the physical access of sport events and providing through that an equal event experience. This can be strongly, however, supported by any sort of perception of disabled people amongst the non-disabled ones. What does Accessible do in order to educate fans around disability? I think you have a great position to beat two challenges basically at the same time, access and perception.
Yeah, so I think if we think of a disabled person, more often than not, unless we think of somebody that we know, we would typically picture a older gentleman using a wheelchair. That's just the everyone's real perception when you think of a disabled person first and foremost. Part of that is probably the fact that the universal disability symbol is for a wheelchair user. In actual fact, wheelchair users actually make up a relatively small percentage of the total disabled population. The works that we do, we look to support all disabled people, so wheelchair users and people with limited mobility, obviously physical infrastructure will be one of the key components to address there. But if we think of a blind or partially sighted person, if we think of a deaf or hard of hearing person, maybe a learning disabled person or somebody with Down syndrome, a neurodivergent person, someone with autism, for example. We also look to work with people with long-term health conditions and what we are known as non-visible disabilities. So the disabilities that maybe aren't particularly obvious by looking at someone. And that could be, for example, endometriosis, for example, within a female supporter, although it's not a disability necessarily or wouldn't be defined legally as a disability, it's still a health condition that has a big impact and needs to really to be considered when we do think of that match day experience. So a lot of what we do, as we say, is for disabled people, but one of the big changes that we need to make is in the mindsets of non-disabled people to recognize that they've got a role to play in this as well, to make sure that people do feel truly welcomed inside the stadium. So discrimination against disabled people can take a number of different forms. Obviously, the most damaging will be physical or verbal discrimination. But likewise, that mindset that we need to try and change in non-disabled people's minds is to recognize that there will be people here with conditions that we don't necessarily know or can't see straight away. So to be understanding of that and to be mindful of that. And one real life example I can give to you that is when you go inside a stadium, again, you look at say 40, 50, up to 90 or 100,000 people inside that stadium. If everybody needs to go and use the toilet at one time, then there's a very limited number usually of accessible toilets for disabled people. Um, we've probably all done it at some stage when we've really needed to get to that toilet. We've gone to the first thing in sight. So we're trying to educate people to just be mindful that this toilet, this might be an accessible toilet, this might be needed by a disabled person. So just to bear that in mind, to think about the impact that you might have on differently disabled people around you as well. Or what we're trying to do here. I remember a former colleague said to me a number of years ago, it's almost like we're salesmen in a way, and that we're selling an idea or a new way of doing things to people. And I definitely believe that that is an important topic here. That a lot of the indirect discrimination, I guess you could call it, that disabled people might face on a match day, a lot of that isn't mindful discrimination. People more often than not aren't going out of their way to discriminate against disabled people or to put a barrier up to disabled people in enjoying that opportunity and independence that we spoke about earlier. So it's just about helping people to recognize really where it is important to think about differently disabled people and just to bear that in mind so you're not impacting negatively on someone else's day.
I had a really good friend of mine, and he's disabled from neck down. And we spent a lot of time together. And often I felt, that I'm not really sure when I need to offer help. Do I have to wait that the person asks me for the help? Could you bring and educate me on what's the correct behavior when it comes to a stadium surrounding? I have somebody in a wheelchair being next to me. How do I approach a person to offer my help so that it does not come over condescendingly or a pitiful type of approach?
No, that's a great question. One of the training modules that we've developed at AccessibAll that we've delivered to clubs, leagues, and national associations right across the globe is our disability inclusion and etiquette training. And that's all about how you interact with differently disabled people. So we've definitely got a lot of experience that we can bring to this discussion also. Ultimately, disabled people just want to be treated the same way as anybody else, really. And more often than not, if you think that a disabled person might need your help or you want to offer your help, the best way to do that is just say to them, can I help you with this or this? And if the disabled person says no, even if it looks to you like they actually might need that help, if they say no, then fine, because they might not actually need that help. What looks like them struggling might not actually be the case. That they'll know best ultimately. When it comes to communication, there's a number of different um, ways that we offer that advice based on differently disabled people as well. So ultimately, the main thing to do is treat people with respect and dignity. But you'd expect that for disabled people and non-disabled people. If we all treat each other a little bit better, then I'm sure the world would be a lot better place. But yeah, there's a few just sort of key tips to keep in mind, really. So when you speak to a wheelchair user, for example, try not to be sort of towering over them, looking down at them. It can be quite intimidating sometimes. If you're talking to a blind or partially sighted person, just introduce yourself to them so they know where you are and can follow you. The vast majority of blind and partially sighted people do have some degree of vision. There's a very small percentage that are actually totally blind, so many will like to know where you are and will usually lip read to help to follow the discussion a bit as well. Same for deaf and hard of hearing people. It's really important that they can see where you are to lip read and to follow that conversation more also. A few key tips that we look at, I've spoke about, we'd advise, like for example, a wheelchair user, you might think that you're doing the right thing when if you see a wheelchair user, for example, trying to go up a steep hill, just to take the back of the wheelchair and help to push them up. It might feel like you're doing them a favor and doing them a right thing, but if you position that the other way around as a non-disabled person, if you're walking up a hill and all of a sudden someone puts their arms around you and drags you up the hill, then you'd probably be looking to call the police or at least be taking them up on
Yeah.
asking what it is they're doing, probably not in such kind words. So yeah, treat people with respect, but ultimately just speak to people first and foremost and say, can I help? What can I do to help? Be there to offer that support. It is a training module that we do offer. And we find it's particularly valuable for stewards, volunteers, but also people, for example, in the ticket offices, working in the club stores as well, just to be a bit more mindful about how to do that, how to have that interaction with disabled people in a way that is respectful. Um, but ultimately, the message I'd probably give there is don't worry as well too much about getting it wrong necessarily. So as long as you ask, you'll probably get the advice that's best for that person. And the advice for one wheelchair user might be very different from a different wheelchair user, for example. It's very much a personal choice, but speak to people, ask how can we help you, and don't be worried about necessarily putting your foot in it by saying the wrong thing. There's a difference between saying the wrong thing or saying something that's offensive that should never be said to a disabled person. No one's going to necessarily judge you. So if you said to a wheelchair user, "Do you want to go on a walk?" or something like that, no one's going to really take offense at that more often than not, unless it's meant in an offensive way. It's just a term of expression, and it's the sort of thing that many people may sort of worry or panic about. And I think a lot of disabled people, especially some of the ones that we spoke to when we developed this training module, said you identify more when people do panic and worry about what to say. So speak to disabled people the way you would to anybody else, just with that respect and understanding and dignity.
It feels like that 80% of what you guys are doing could be basically solved with simple human empathy instead of with hardcore infrastructural development. Is that feeling okay-ish, or am I off?
No, I'd say I think ultimately, infrastructure does have a key role to play, but we only get to that point really of changing infrastructure once we change people's mindsets, and people need to want to get to that stage. So there might be an old stadium, maybe even a new stadium, where the accessibility levels aren't the best. But nothing changes until we change the mindsets of the people within that club or venue or national association to really want to change that and to understand why that is an issue as well. So it is all about changing those mindsets, and we don't get the infrastructure changes overnight. That's something that might take 5, maybe even longer years to come about. But when we can change people's minds and make those small changes along the way, it really does have an overwhelmingly massive impact.
You mentioned your educational program. Do you offer this to clubs that they educate their hardcore fan base, or how do you get this message across to?
Yeah, so the training modules that we offer, they typically are available more to the customer facing staff on a match day. So it's the sort of information that the clubs would look to get out to their stewards, to their security staff, and all the other roles that there are on a match day as well. We look to raise awareness amongst non-disabled fans and non-disabled people through a few different ways. And one of the key ways of doing that is our yearly Week of Action initiative, where we really shine a spotlight on accessibility and inclusion. And there'll be activities taking place on match days, on non-match days, that really help to, again, show what disabled people can do and do bring to the table, rather than maybe thinking what disabled people can't do on a match day. So the Week of Action, we bill it as a celebration each year where we really put disability and disabled people in that spotlight for themselves, really to empower themselves, but also for everybody else to see, these are truly valuable members of our club.
Going a bit into the business aspect of it, because you mentioned yourself that disabled people don't want to be looked differently at as somebody without disabilities. And we are all looked at as a business case for a club, for a sport good manufacturer, and whatever. Where do you see the biggest challenges for the football clubs to adopt a more inclusive fan engagement? And when it comes to disabilities, and where are the low-hanging fruits for them?
Yeah, so I think one of the big changes we touched upon, it is all about changing that mindset and understanding that disabled people really truly are valuable customers to the business, and in many cases an afterthought that haven't really been given the chance to show their true value as customers. Historically and traditionally, many clubs would offer free tickets or discounted tickets for disabled people, because it felt like it was the right thing to do. But that really lessens and weakens their standing when it comes to a disabled person having a negative experience then. So if you've had a ticket for free, for example, but you've had a really crummy day out, you've not really got the same opportunity to complain about that then, to say, this is poor, this needs to be improved, because the response you're going to get back is, well, it was free. What more do you want? So we need to really show that there is a value in clubs and stadiums and venues embracing accessibility to ensure that disabled people really can come into the stadiums, not just to buy their tickets, but to buy food and drink inside the stadium, to spend money in the club store, to become regular customers and fans coming to the stadium on a consistent basis. And we touched before on the fact that disabled people typically don't come by themselves either. So they may want to come with family and friends. So if we exclude the disabled people, we're excluding that wider group of people who then could come with them. So it's not just about one person becoming a customer, but about a whole group becoming consistent customers for the clubs as a business. That we're really trying to show the true value here isn't just limited to that one person. It has such a massive impact. And word of mouth is really key there as well. Disabled people know disabled people. And we said before that so many disabled people haven't felt comfortable in going to a live match, and then some that have gone to a live match hadn't felt comfortable going back to a live match. So it's really important that we do improve that match day experience so word can get out. So, we can say, look, I went to this match. It's had a massive impact on me. I've had a great day. I want to go back. I want to go and do this, this, and this now. It really does have that domino chain effect, really, where opening that door to the stadiums and showing people that a positive match day can empower that disabled person to do so much more going forwards.
How would you convince major league teams to invest in accessibility?
Yeah, it's the golden question, really. Yeah, I think there's so many cases that we've made around the business case, looking at the value disabled people bring alongside their social spheres. There's legal cases out there to be made for embracing accessibility. We have in Europe now, the European Accessibility Act is about to come into force in many of the EU countries. And those pieces of legislation and regulation will only strengthen over time. So it really does pay to future-proof yourself and to get onto this topic before you're made to make changes. But ultimately, we look at the moral side of this as well, that it's the right thing to do, that we have a game that truly is welcoming and open for all. So we look at disabled people as a whole, but if we look at the subgroups of disabled people as well and the different experiences that so many of them have in society, we preach and preach about we are the world's leading game in football, that this is a game that truly is for all. So it's important that we don't forget so many disabled people. We mentioned before between 15 and 25% of the global population this impacts. So it is really important that we offer that opportunity for disabled people. And as I said, they will become the most loyal supporters who will stick by you through thick and thin going forwards as well. The business case really speaks for itself. We spoke about an enormous spending power of disabled people in today's market. Again, this is something that's likely going to improve more and more over years as businesses and employment becomes more accessible for disabled people. The opportunity of hybrid working, for example, makes a big impact so that more disabled people can join the workforce. This disposable income we expect will continue to grow for many years, making disabled people a huge, huge market for the decision makers within the game. But ultimately, yeah, we want our game to look the way that we want it to look. So that means that we want the stadium to be diverse. We want it to be welcoming for everybody. We want everyone to come to our stadiums and say, you know what, we've had a great day there today. And it's something that really has that massive, massive change. We look at people who've become disabled later in life who have experienced it all as a non-disabled fan. We don't want them to feel there's not a place in the stadiums for them anymore. Likewise, people who are born disabled, they should never be born without that opportunity of experiencing the thrill of a last minute winner or going to a penalty shootout. Those experiences and emotions that really money can't buy and we'll never forget as part of our lives. Our game really does have a duty, I think, to give everyone that chance to see why we love our game so much.
Many of the things that you brought up is very much on the side of the disabled person, why somebody should have the possibility to join. But looking at the football club, of course, you mentioned the huge spending power that has accumulated because, first of all, they have less opportunities to spend.
Yeah.
On one side, the other part of it is what you mentioned, hybrid working models makes it more possible for them to engage in the workforce. What is the convincing part more on the football club side? Is it image? Is it of course increased revenue? do you bring like hardcore fact numbers to these clubs?
Yeah, I think you're right. Image does play a huge role in this. It is important that the clubs show that they truly do represent their full fan base, not just a small group of it, but really do offer that opportunity to everybody who loves their club and wants to follow that club. Image does play a massive role in that. I absolutely agree. And the business side of things, we've mentioned it already. There's huge opportunity to look at disabled people as a revenue option there, and for a relatively low output in terms of small improvements to the stadium, the return on that can be massive over, not immediate necessarily, but over many years' time. You will look at this as a way to improve revenues within the club for sure. I absolutely believe that disability ultimately doesn't discriminate. Anyone can become disabled at any point in their life. And that may be the leaders within a club. There's nothing to say that someone won't become disabled at some stage. So it is important that we don't exclude people based on that as well. If you're, for example, the chairman or president of a major football club, there's every possibility you may become disabled in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So it's absolutely massive, really, to show this this approach to the clubs to show that it's really important to not just think about the here and now when it comes to disability, but bear in mind this could happen, this could impact anybody at any time. So it's really, really vital that they do factor this into their yearly and long-term planning goals. So to continue making those improvements, we do find that more and more disabled people are living longer lives, thanks to advances within medical treatment, for example. And likewise, more people become disabled. That percentage we spoke about of 15 to 25% of people who are disabled in the global population. Back when I started with AccessibAll, so that only goes back 14 years now, we were looking more around 12 to 15%. So there has been a big jump there. Obviously, we had a global pandemic in there as well, which has changed things. But I think recognizing different disability, recognizing different access requirements has a big role to play there also. So it is something that's going to grow and grow. It's a topic that isn't going to go away as well. And it's a topic that can't be fixed overnight. And I think when we recognize and understand that, that's part of the battle, really, that we can say, well, we'll address this part now. Maybe in a year's time, we'll look to improve this, then we'll look to improve this. And those improvements over time do improve image, but will also show more and more disabled people that, yeah, my club cares about this, but most importantly, my club cares about me.
Moving to the other side of the equation, we've spoken about the big clubs. Now looking at a small club, what options do these small clubs without the infinite bank accounts have in order to provide fan engagement to their disabled fans?
So yeah, I think some of the best examples that we've found or worked with across European football isn't necessarily always the biggest clubs and the clubs that would come to mind immediately. And some of those clubs that are further down the ladder, or it may be in a smaller country, for example, really have been some of the shining lights when it's come to making those changes inside the stadium. I mentioned earlier, making small changes can have a massive, massive impact, and it doesn't necessarily need an endless pot of money or a complete rebuild of the stadium to address this topic. So the way that you engage and interact with your disabled people doesn't necessarily have to cost anything. We can deliver our training to you for a relatively small fee, just for our trainer to come out and give that training. But that's something that can have a unquantifiable impact really for so many disabled people. Because ultimately, when you go to a match, you might remember the goals, you might remember a penalty save, you might remember a red card. But the thing that you'll remember more than anything is the way that you felt inside that stadium. And if someone gives you a reason to feel bad, then that's what's going to stick in your mind, really. So it is really important that we look to make those small changes that maybe do cost nothing or next to nothing. Ultimately, it is all about the way people feel rather than what happens on the pitch or in the stands. That's the thing that people will take away and will stick with them for a long time to come. But looking again at the practicalities of the match day experience for disabled people, you might identify, for example, we need a bit more parking spaces for wheelchair users, or we need to extend the parking spaces that are here to make them compliant for a disabled person to use. That only costs a jar of paint, really. So, it's not a huge outlay to do something like that. And likewise, looking at the services that you can implement at your stadium. So if you identify, for example, disabled people, particularly wheelchair user, for example, might struggle to use the food and drink kiosks, then what can we do differently? A bit of creative thinking there rather than have to rebuild everything. Well, how about we introduce a hawker system where just a steward or a volunteer can go to a disabled person and say, I can get it for you. Let me know what you want. We can bring a payment terminal to you. And it takes away that sort of physical issue that could be faced then when it comes to the actual food and drink kiosks. So a bit of creative thinking. But we've worked with stadiums right across the spectrum, from the very biggest to some very, very small stadiums as well. And it's all about identifying those issues that will have that big impact, speaking to disabled people as well to ask them, what could we do that would make things better for you on a match day? What if you had this amount of money available, what would you want to do with it? How about if you had an endless pot of money, how could we improve things as well? And getting that experience and that user-led knowledge really from the disabled fans themselves to understand what will have the biggest impact for them. And that's something that the clubs can do for nothing. They can speak to their fans, they can offer surveys, they can have a meeting with disabled fans representatives, to really get that idea from them, and then they can come to an organization like AccessibAll, and we can give them the expert guidance and advice and on how to actually implement that change.
The next one is an understanding question, because I understand that we are talking 16+% or 20% plus disabled people around the globe throughout our population. And football clubs have been missing out on these people, let's say close to 100%. How is that possible?
So yeah, it's a question that we ask ourselves on a regular basis. Disabled people do make up a sizable proportion of any population, as well as the global population. And it's quite difficult sometimes because we know that there are misconceptions around access and inclusion. Some people, some decision makers, for example, might think, oh, we haven't got the money to look at this topic now. If we had more money, maybe we could do. But as we said already, it doesn't necessarily need that pot of money to have that big impact on disabled people's lives. I think when it comes to some of the bigger clubs, obviously there's global fan bases involved now, and it's not it's not a difficult situation really to sell out some of these massive stadiums. So it really does need that champion inside the club to stand up and say, we need to address our duties to disabled people here. It's great that we can fill the stadium, but what can we do to ensure that we've got a really truly reflective fan base of our wider society and of our club? Disabled people will support football clubs in a number of different ways. Some may want to be inside the stadium, some may not, but it's about being valued as a part of that club as well. So it really does make a difference there when you've got someone inside the club who understands the topic really and is pushing for improvement and change along the way. And the bottom line doesn't necessarily reflect it on day one, but on day 5, 6, 7, for example, further down the line, you will see that positive impact that has been had on the revenue side when it comes to changes that you've made and implemented. But more often than not as well, the changes that you'll see are the ones that will stick with you most as well. So we've spoken with club staff, club representatives, disabled and non-disabled across the globe. And the memories that stick with them more than anything are always the fact that disabled people are there alongside their fellow fans. They're enjoying the match, they're celebrating the victories, they're mourning the losses along the way, but ultimately they're part of something bigger there as well. And it really is a life-changing message, not just for the disabled fans, but for the people within the club as well, to know that you're at a club that truly does value all of their fans, from the ones sat in the executive seats to the ones coming in on season tickets or day-by-day match tickets, and disabled fans right at the heart of that as well.
I think this is a really, really key message there. And taking this opportunity to move from the business aspect away more to the collaborations and events part of this conversation. AccessibAll is a core UEFA CSR partner. How has this collaboration advanced accessibility and inclusion in football?
So yeah, the partnership between UEFA and AccessibAll, I don't think it's possible to quantify just how much of a difference has been made over the years. As I said, I joined the organization in 2011, and that was in the run-up to UEFA Euro 2012, which was taking place in Poland and Ukraine. And at the time, we went and spoke with disabled fans in both countries to understand the climate as it was pre-tournament there, really to get the knowledge of the issues that they faced and how many disabled people were attending matches. I always remember one meeting that we had in Poland where we said to one of the disabled fans representatives, so how many disabled fans attend matches in Poland of a weekend? You know, is it 10,000, 9,000? And he said, uh, about 6 to 8. I mean, like, oh, 6 to 8,000, really good numbers. And he said, no, 6 to 8. So we realized then that we had a huge mission on our hands, not just to improve the stadiums, but to make disabled people aware, really, that there is a place for them in our stadiums, that disabled people are welcome. And in Poland, just as the example to carry on there, we saw only 3, 4 years later, a world record was broken in Poland for the highest number of disabled people attending one single match, which was well over 1,000 disabled people at that one game. And that just shows that the impact that this does have, that it is about approaching this in a number of different ways. You know, we work with UEFA, and that partnership helps to open doors in a way that we couldn't possibly quantify or do ourselves, in terms of getting in there these major events like the Euros, or getting to the decision makers and the leaders within these countries as well. But a lot of it starts in the grassroots also, and we need to really work with disabled people and empower them, to show them that there truly is a place for them in the stadiums. We want them inside the stadiums. We want to know how things went for them in the stadiums, the good and the bad. The good because we all want to have a good match day experience, and the bad because we can build on that. Then we can identify where change still needs to happen, and work with that as well. Going forward from Euro 2012, there was a huge number of disabled people that had a really positive experience at that tournament in Poland and Ukraine. And that's continued through a number of tournaments with UEFA, culminating in Euro 2024 in Germany last year, where more disabled people than ever attended a live sports tournament. But also on top of that, services like audio descriptive commentary, where the availability was multiplied to an enormous scale, where previously at tournaments, audio descriptive commentary for partially sighted and blind fans was available inside the stadiums and maybe in the local language. For Euro 2024, it was available through the UEFA app, which meant that people around the world could tune in. And it was available in a range of different languages as well. So there was German at every match because of the tournament happening in Germany. But for almost every team participating in the tournament, audio descriptive commentary in their language was also available. So it was an enormous step forwards, the likes of which have never been seen before in a tournament. And thousands of people were listening to that stream every single match. So it has an overwhelming impact, really. And again, we look at what we can do to change the match day experience inside the stadium to be better. But likewise now, the way the world is football fans all across the world watching on TV or listening in via radio or online. So there's a lot of different experiences to consider, and a lot that we can be doing to really show that all disabled people are welcome to be a part of our game.
You know, one of the key trends in sport related impact management and purpose-led sponsorship is partnerships. Partnerships like with your organizations, where corporates with similar values are supporting good causes, the ones such as AccessibAll. What has been your experience in partnering with corporates around this topic? that want to make a difference?
Yeah, so to be honest, we haven't had much experience on that side. We have had discussions with a number of corporations and organizations who have taken a real interest in the work that we are doing and wanted to find out more. But I think it really is time now for the corporate world to look to step up and play their role here also. It's the impact that we can have can be multiplied by so much more if we do have that opportunity of that additional backing and that understanding from the corporate world as well. We've mentioned it a few times. It doesn't need to be a €500,000 job. It's something that for a relatively small outlay, we can have that big impact for a lot of people. So if we can multiply that with support from the corporate world, then there's no limit really on the impact that we could have for disabled people as a whole inside the stadiums, but also into the wider society. And that partnership model really is key there. It's not just about Accessible and UEFA and the club or the venue, but there's so many more stakeholders involved here. It's about the public transport providers, for example, the train organisations. It's about the local councils and national governments really getting on board and getting an understanding really of the impact and the role that they've got to play. Everyone has a role to play in this. It's not just the role of Accessible or UEFA or a particular club. We've all got a role to play to make sure that our game is truly inclusive. So yeah, I absolutely think through partnership we can achieve everything and so much more really. There is no ceiling on where we can go once we sort of sell this idea to the right partners who can really empower us then to take this message much further.
Well, a big shout out to the corporates who want to get engaged with you. Don't hesitate to reach out to us or Accessible directly if you share similar values and want to bring great and amazing experiences to the fans of football and also wider in sports. Because as mentioned, Accessible is around sports mainly. The fifth Accessible International Summit took place in November 24. What was the experience like, and what were the key outcomes of this summit?
Yeah, so we were delighted to be partnering with Atletico Madrid, who hosted the event, the 2-day event in November. Prior to the pandemic, we used to hold our in-person summits every 3 years, and obviously things went on a bit of a back burner around the pandemic time. We had to move online the way much of the world did. So the Madrid summit was the first in-person gathering that we'd held of that size for 6 years in the end. So it was incredible to see so many different stakeholders from right across the game coming together. Uh, Speaking together and working together in different ways. We had the leaders from FIFA and UEFA and leagues and clubs and national associations all attending. We had disability experts there from a range of different approaches, different organizations. But most powerfully, we had disabled people right next to them as well. Disabled fans from across the globe joined us at the event. And it really does help to show that they are truly valued and a key part of our game. When you see these different worlds come together, it really shows that we are united in the message that we want to convey and the game that we want to have, really. So it's incredibly rewarding when you do attend the summit to see so many worlds collide and come together because we're all speaking in one unified voice in the end. We're all there because we agree the same thing that disabled people have this key role to play within our game. The summit itself, we had some really incredible speeches and presentations provided, really showing the impact that differently disabled people have within sport as a whole. We also had, as I mentioned, UEFA and FIFA were there to update on their commitment to the game and reaffirm their commitment ultimately to show that this is a topic that is being taken very seriously at the top table when it comes to football as well. We had from our side, we launched our Access Captains initiative, which is again really helping to empower a lot of local experts in different countries to give them the opportunity to drive local change further as well with the support of AccessibAll and our partners behind them also. So that was really game changing for us to extend that. We're a very, very small team at AccessibAll, but we've got friends right across the globe and like-minded partners who can help to spread that message. And that's what the Access Captains was all about, really, to further empower these leaders in their countries to go on and achieve even more than they already are. Um, Ultimately, we ended the summit with a father and son story. So, Ellis Palmer, who's a disabled fan from the UK, and his father, Rob, who's non-disabled and has worked for the likes of Sky Sports and ESPN. He's traveled the globe as a football commentator. Ellis has traveled as a football fan. And we had them just talk about their experiences of football as a father and son, really, what it means to them to attend a match, what memories they have. And I think everyone who was in attendance at the summit would absolutely agree that that's the real take home there. That we didn't just hear about the impact we can have, but we saw it in real life, the impact that this game can have, the memories that this game has created for Ellis and Rob, and the impact it's had on them as a family also. I think those real life personal stories often are the most powerful and the most mind changing, really. So I'd encourage anyone who hasn't already seen Ellis and Rob's story to definitely look into that more, because that again, that's just one example. There's millions of disabled people across Europe having similar stories, but bringing that story to life and really showing people the true impact that this does have definitely struck a few chords in the room that day.
You mentioned that FIFA, UEFA, and major clubs were attending the summit. How does your initiative shape the fan engagement strategy of football teams? Are there signs of change?
Yeah, I think absolutely that there's a lot more understanding now about how to communicate with your fans in a number of different ways. Just one example that comes straight to mind at the Emirates Stadium, the home of Arsenal in the UK. For a couple of years now, it's been at every match where the large screens inside the stadium, there's a sign language interpreter interpreting everything that happens on the pitch, pre-match, halftime as well. So that just an example that blind and sorry, deaf and hard of hearing fans can be involved as well on that match day. We do work with UEFA and FIFA on communications when it comes to terminology guidance, for example, and how to speak about disabled people and speak with disabled people. There's a phrase that's very common in the disability world that's nothing about us without us. So it is really important to ensure that disabled people's voices are heard as well. It's not just about ourselves or any other organization sharing those opinions of disabled people for them, but letting disabled people have that opportunity to use their own voices as well and tell us really what matters most to them. So it is really important. Representation is key in communication as well. You know, it's vital that any communication is diverse and shows the diversity of our wider fan base, and disabled people, a range of differently disabled people, are key to that also. So it's something that we're definitely witnessing more and more, that clubs are taking this seriously, and not just in a tokenistic way, which is sometimes being the case as well, but truly engaging with disabled fans to understand them and to showcase them and show the support that the clubs have for them also.
Moving on to the other topic area around guidelines, resources, and certifications. In partnership with UEFA, Accessible developed updated accessibility guidelines. How do these guidelines assist clubs and national associations in creating more inclusive matchday experiences?
Yeah, so the story of these guidelines goes right back to 2011, really. We co-authored with UEFA a guide called Access for All, which was the good practice guide to create an accessible matchday experience. And that came about really because of a lack of regulation in this area. So on the UEFA side, we're dealing with countries in 55, dealing with countries from 55 different countries. Sorry. So the legislation in each country, the building regulations will vary massively. And we worked with UEFA and we really established the need there to have a guideline in place for all of football to aim towards that went beyond legislation and went beyond regulation really to ensure consistency, but help people to anticipate what will be available at a stadium also. So the Access for All guide was published in 2011. And we did see a huge improvement there in stadiums right across Europe because all of a sudden there was a reference point that people could come to. Good practices were highlighted to them so that they weren't going into this not really knowing what to do. They knew they wanted to make a change, but now they knew how they could make that change as well. Um, Obviously, that guide came out a long time ago, so we worked with UEFA in terms of developing a new and updated guide that encompass the changes that have happened involving legislation and regulation, but also the developments that have come through in terms of technology and practices within the sport as well. So back in 2011, for example, sensory viewing rooms were pretty much unheard of in the stadium experience. Now it's something that's becoming hugely popular. Right across Europe, sensory viewing rooms are opening up for neurodivergent fans inside stadiums. So things like that had to be included in this new guide as well to reflect the fact that things have changed and the journey has come a long way since 2011. So the guide now, the accessibility guidelines, again, it works through a walkthrough really of the match day experience. So right from the start in terms of getting to the stadium, how you get around the stadium, how you watch the match, right down to leaving the stadium as well. It's there to share those best practice examples and solutions that other clubs may have found or other venues have implemented. There's also a checklist that comes with it now as well, so that venues and clubs and national associations can really understand first and foremost where they do stand when it comes to accessibility at their stadium. And that's often half the battle, really, that people don't necessarily understand how accessible their stadium is and what the key areas of focus and improvement are. So the checklist allows them to effectively self-assess themselves. They can look at the areas that they know need further improvement, and they can then refer to the guidelines, or they can come to an organization such as AccessibAll, and we can help them to achieve those improvements that have been identified along the way. Then it really does help to factor into that short, medium, and long-term planning goals. So to use the guidelines and the checklist, because it really helps to take away the fear factor around it. You know, it's a very big, comprehensive document, and to digest it all in one go is quite difficult to do. So it's purposely been designed so that you can refer to particular sections when you know there's one particular area that you want to improve, you can go straight to that area. And all that information's there then to support you along the way within your journey at your stadium.
You guys also created the Access Champion certifications, and it was introduced to set new standards in inclusive sports and entertainment. Could you explain this certification and its intended impact on clubs and venues?
Yeah, so when it comes to the certification, this is looking to take things one step further now. So the guidelines that are in place and have been in place for a number of years look at how we meet and exceed the minimum requirements when it comes to stadium infrastructure and services available. The certification is looking to take that to a whole new level now, where we're not looking at beating and exceeding the minimum, but looking at absolute excellence, really. So through the certification program, we initially start with clubs and venues, again, self-assessing themselves to recognize their areas where they may need additional help and support. It'll then be assessed by the AccessibAll team, and we'll work with them to really understand the situation at their stadium so we can look to improve things. But then it showcases those that really are going above and beyond and celebrating the venues and stadiums that truly are fully encompassing of this accessibility journey and welcoming for differently disabled people. Not just to celebrate them and to congratulate them on the work they're doing, but also to give aspiration to other clubs and venues as well to understand how they can get to that level also, to exceed the minimum, go right above and beyond and become champions in their own their own right also. Um, it's something that we look to review on a 3 year, 3 to 5 year basis as well. So the journey never really ends when it comes to access improvements. It's something that we're always looking to improve and get better and develop further. So the certification's got a key role to play there in that long-term planning. And I'm very excited that we should have some really promising news to share soon around the certification and the first venue that will receive the certification. And we're already receiving inquiries from a number of other stadiums who are very keen to find out more about how they can get involved in this as well and want to work with us to actively improve that match day experience.
A big congrats to you guys on this major progress. I would like to have one more specific question to this segment, and that is around a specific role, the disability access officers. What do they do and what's their purpose?
Yeah, the disability access officers are absolutely essential to all the work that we do, but also to disabled fans also. If we look at a football club or a national association as an organization, it's a huge, huge operation that could have hundreds, even thousands of employees. So it was vital that we found to be a true champion responsible for accessibility and inclusion within these organizations as well, to make sure really that the topic doesn't get lost in amongst everything else that happens within these clubs and associations. So the disability access officer's role really is to represent the interests of disabled people within that organization. That's disabled fans first and foremost will play a key role there, but it's not just limited to that as well. And it's about advising the club or national association on accessible employment strategies, for example, to ensure that disabled people can become employees or volunteers within the club as well. They're there really to champion this topic to the very top level of the club, and be the one that is the liaison point for any disabled people who may have a question or an issue that they need to get experts' advice and guidance on. Again, not to make sure that it doesn't sort of fall in between the cracks or get lost amongst everything else happening within that organisation. So with the Disability Access Officer, we worked with UEFA a number of years ago to implement that into their club licensing regulations, and we then delivered training right across Europe. I think we reached around 40 countries in Europe with our in-person training and have continued to offer remote advice and guidance there also. We also co-authored the Disability Access Officer Handbook with UEFA, which we'll be reviewing and updating in the coming months as well. Just to offer that ongoing support to the disability access officers, because we know completely it can be a very difficult job. And again, a lot of what they're doing is about changing mindsets and showing departments, even with inside their own organizations, that improvement can be made and needs to be made. So the DAO role is absolutely critical when it comes to liaising with organizations such as ourselves, but also liaising with disabled fans and disabled people looking to interact with the club.
Going into the community engagement part, what is the Total Access Week of Action? What are the goals for this initiative?
Yeah, the Week of Action, it's ultimately a celebration of disabled people and the diverse roles that they can play within our game. We've had our 13th campaign. It's just drawing to an end now. We celebrate annually every year during March, and we see some incredible initiatives and activities during this time that really help to prove the point about why this matters so much. That the Week of Action, it's something that started initially in Poland and Ukraine, in legacy of our works in Euro 2012. And quite quickly, other countries were coming to us saying, we want to get involved. We need to be right at the heart of this. And it's been celebrated in over 50 countries and reached right around the world now as well, outside of Europe. It's a time when disabled people are in the spotlight. So a chance for the clubs and the leagues and national associations to reaffirm that commitment of theirs to disabled fans and show disabled fans that they do truly value and appreciate them as a part of their organisations as well. I could start to name some of the activities that we've seen over the years, but I'd end up missing some out. It's incredible to see some of the visuals that do come out of that. And I can say on a personal level, some of the clubs that get involved on a yearly basis, making those year-on-year changes, it warms the heart really to show how much of an impact that it does have. We've worked for a number of years with Athletic Club in Bilbao in Spain. And they've always gone above and beyond to promote this activity and get involved. The San Mamés Stadium lights up blue in AccessibAll colours each year, and disabled fans are brought to the stadium to again to celebrate and reflect the value that the club puts on them. And many more clubs do get involved. I can say at Celtic, for example, in Scotland, they always get involved with incredible activities and really innovative ideas and solutions. So in last year's campaign at Celtic, they worked with a local school for disabled children. And the club anthem, You'll Never Walk Alone, was signed by the disabled children on the pitch before the game. Um, I personally am an Everton supporter, so You'll Never Walk Alone's not high up on my playlist usually, but I'd have to admit there was a lot more than just a lump in my throat that day watching that. I definitely shed a tear or two just to see the impact that it has really, that football has. And this was without a ball even being kicked at this stage. This was kids on the pitch showing um, their support for the club in their way and 60,000 people in the stands supporting them, cheering them on, and I'm sure plenty more tears inside in the stands that day as well.
I think you might have mentioned previously the Access Captains initiative to collaborate with disabled fans and advocates. How does this project aim to drive change at local level?
Yeah, so it's really important that we have that local interaction and that understanding of the national landscape. Really, I mentioned earlier, AccessibAll is a tiny group of employees. We've got 4 full-time members of staff. You know, it's a small operation. We've got a lot of work to do as a small team, and it's vital that we work with like-minded partners and friends and colleagues out in the countries to understand their expertise and their local awareness. Really, um, we try to do as much as we can ourselves, but absolutely, it's imperative that we understand that local solution and what works in one country may not necessarily work in another as well. So we've paired up with the experts that we've worked with over many years, and we know are pressing the agenda locally in their countries and have done for an extended period of time to really give them that sense of empowerment and that support from AccessibAll to help open doors for them to continue to be those change makers in the countries that they're based also. We've also got a range of differently disabled people and non-disabled people who are on the Access Captains group, bringing different levels of expertise to that group as well. So as well as disabled fans, we've got club representatives on there. We've got audio descriptive commentators on there. We've got a whole host of different people coming at this from different aspects, really, to bring their shared expertise and experience together. And yeah, the Access Captains is something that is going to continue to grow. We're looking to extend that cohort that we have to further empower people within those countries to continue to be champions of this topic. So there should be some exciting news again in the coming weeks and months in terms of the next set of Access Captains that we'll be working with as well, continuing to work with the existing captains also to make this a truly global movement and to be there on the ground to bring those solutions, those experiences, and those difficulties to us as well. It's important that we do hear the good and the bad because that's how we improve ultimately. And as I say, things aren't always compatible between one country and another, but there might be a solution in one country that we can bring to another country that could make a big change there also. So there's a huge potential through the Access Captains, and we're delighted to be working alongside them.
What is your call to action to the players and icon of the sport?
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier. I think ultimately the message that we try to get out there is that disability doesn't discriminate, and you could be anybody who becomes disabled later on in life. You know, there's nothing to say that some of the leading players involved in the game today or involved in the game previously may not become disabled later in life. I can give you the example of Pele, obviously one of the greatest, if not the greatest players of all time, who later on in life became a wheelchair user. If our stadiums aren't accessible for Pele to come in, then we've got a real problem there, you know. So it's absolutely imperative that we remember that disability isn't discriminatory and can happen to any of us. It can happen to ourselves or to our loved ones. So it's vital that we use our voice and our power to show disabled people that there is a place for them in our stadiums, that whatever issues they may face on the outside world, that at least there's a place in our stadiums where they can come and be a part of a much bigger group and with fellow supporters sharing in one united voice for their clubs that they are passionate about. One of my former colleagues said to me once, it's bloody hard work being a disabled person sometimes. So that impact from the heroes really, when the players themselves or the icons associated with the game, when you get that sort of vote of confidence really from them, that their buy-in, that they honor you, they appreciate you, they value your support. It's priceless, really. And we know that just a player might not be able to make the change in terms of physical infrastructure at the stadium, but these players, more than anyone, probably can change the way someone feels on that any given day. So yeah, anything that we can work with the players and the icons and the familiar names across the game to show the value that they place on disabled fans and disabled people, it's unlimited really in the impact it can have on a disabled person's self-esteem and also their belief that there is a place in this stadium for me after all.
Do you collaborate with testimonials amongst the players?
We've worked with some players previously. It's quite difficult, really, just because obviously it's a very busy lifestyle as a football player. In Armenia, for example, I can give you we've just appointed a number of player ambassadors in Armenia through our Access captain in the country. She's incredibly active on the ground and is working with all the players to help to get this message out there again to say, you know, that it's vital that disabled fans are there alongside us along the way. We hear your voices from the pitch. We want you in the stadiums alongside us. And like I say, like, it's huge the impact that that has. We have had a few other players that we've worked with previously as well to get some testimonials and some experiences from them. But as we touched upon earlier, disability is the largest minority group in any population. And if we're not disabled ourselves, the chances are we probably know someone or are close to somebody who is. So although many of the players may not be disabled themselves, I'm sure there are plenty who have got disabled family members or friends or relatives at some point as well. So it is really vital that we do utilize that power of the voice of the players, I think. And you know, it's something that we're really keen to do to have that ambassador side really to show the impact that this work does have for disabled people.
Looking ahead, what are Accessible's primary objectives for the next 5 years in promoting accessibility and inclusion in sports?
Yeah, we've got some key tournaments approaching us. So obviously we've got a FIFA World Cup taking place in the US, Canada, and Mexico in 2026. Before that tournament, we have the FIFA Club World Cup this summer, taking place in the US. These are the first global sporting events from a football or soccer perspective in the States since the 1994 World Cup. I know they've hosted the Copa America, but in terms of a truly global event like this, it's the first for 30 years or more. So it's a really big opportunity to work in a new market for us effectively and to understand the experiences of disabled people there as well and help to bring those learnings that we've got from Europe and from other countries to understand the experiences of fans in the States, Canada, and Mexico, and so to bring the two together there to ensure a really, truly memorable experience for so many disabled fans at that tournament, but also watching from home as well. We have the UEFA Women's Euro this summer as well. in Switzerland, which will promise to be a really exciting tournament, I'm sure. We've had some incredible growth in the women's game over a number of years through the Euro and through the FIFA Women's World Cup. So very excited to see the impact that that tournament will have for local disabled fans in Switzerland. And then looking ahead to 2028, we have the men's Euros taking place in the UK and Ireland. So again, first time that that country's hosted a major tournament outright by itself since Euro 1996. Scotland and England hosted a couple of games in the Euro in 2020, but obviously in very different circumstances in pandemic situations. So we do have those major tournaments to look ahead to. I think the Access Champion certification is going to be a vital tool for us over the coming years as more and more clubs seek that certification and look to improve on the situation that they have at their stadiums currently. We've also got, we mentioned, exciting changes on the legislative side through the European Accessibility Act. And obviously the 2030 strategy from the UN in terms of embracing the SDGs and understanding the truly global aspect of our works through support such as that as well. So yeah, there's a lot of work still to be done. As I say, we've been active in Europe for 15 years and we've seen incredible strides taken, but we're not done. We've got a lot more still to do to really have a game that truly is open, welcoming, and accessible for everybody. So we'll still continue to work with our partners through the Access Captains, partners such as UEFA and FIFA, working with the national associations, the leagues, and the clubs. And first and foremost, working with the disabled fans themselves to show their value and to help them to self-advocate effectively for themselves. Um, I mentioned earlier, nothing about us without us, and that's something that we very much stand by, that disabled people are a key part of this journey that we're all on together.
And I really hope that you will have a lot of work with new partners coming in who want to join you on your journey. Getting a bit into the cool down, what has been the most rewarding aspect of being part of Accessible for you personally?
Yeah, for me, I think it's all about the impact we have on people's lives. And as I say, first and foremost, I'm a football fan, and I was a football fan long before Accessible or Cafe existed. I was a football fan from birth, effectively, so I know the impact that attending a live football match has for so many people in so many different ways. But since I've been involved with the organization, it's incredibly heartwarming to see the impact that attending a live match can have for a disabled person. Um, there's so many faces that come to mind straight away where it's changed everything for them. It's helped to reduce any social isolation they've had. It's helped them to be a part of something so much bigger, something that maybe they thought they couldn't do, either whether they were born disabled or have become disabled later in life and thought that there's no longer a place in the stadium for them. It's incredible when we see the true impact of those barriers being knocked down. And there's one example that always comes to mind for me, and it's from a blind fan from Ukraine. And she explained to us around the time of Euro 2012 that she'd been going to football matches. She has some vision, but not much. And she had gone to football matches, but it always felt to her like she was just watching a black and white movie. And then the day that she first turned on audio descriptive commentary, she said a rainbow lit up the pitch. And it's something that's never ever left my mind. And it's incredible to know that this is the impact that we're having, not just for that 90 minutes of the match, but really helping disabled people to be a true part of society, not to feel that isolation, not to feel like they're alone, but that they're a part of something so much bigger.
If you could change one thing about how the world approaches accessibility in sports, what would it be?
I think the easy answer, I think, would be to say a fully inclusive experience inside the stadiums. But I think bigger than that even is representation of disabled people at that senior level and that decision-making level, because I think that that's where we will truly see true diversity come through when those leadership boards and groups really do reflect the society as a whole. So that means more women getting involved, more ethnic minorities, and absolutely means more disabled people being involved as well. There should be no barrier to a disabled person reaching the absolute top of our game, um, in any form of that, whether that means as a fan, as a player, as a coach, as an administrator, as a leader or a decision maker. This is a game that truly should be welcoming and inclusive for everybody right across the board. So I think for me, I'd love to see more disabled people involved in that decision-making level, because I think that's when we'll really help to break down those attitudinal barriers and those maybe mental blocks that some people may have to the way that they see disability.
And finally, what message or call to action would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think my call to action is to look at your stadiums, look at the industry as a whole, um, and ask yourself, are we truly reflective of our society? I'd ask you to put yourself in the shoes of a differently disabled person and imagine engaging with your role or even just going around your stadium on a match day as a differently disabled person. Put yourself in their shoes and try and understand the situations that differently disabled people could encounter along the way. Um, we're not going to change the world overnight. It's part of a much bigger process. It's going to take time to do this. The one thing that we can change overnight is the way we think and the way we believe. So I ask you to open up your hearts and open up your minds to really understand disabled people, that disabled people aren't asking for handouts. They're not asking for charity. They just want to be a part of everything the same as everybody else.
And this is really what the power of play is about, speaking to people and organizations with a true mission to use sports to achieve a positive social and environmental impact. I really thank you, Mike, for being with us. That's a wrap on today's episode of The Power of Play. We hope you're feeling inspired by the incredible ways sport is shaping lives and is driving meaningful change. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow us, like, share, comment on our content. And until next time, remember, the game does not end when the whistle blows. The real impact happens beyond the field. Keep playing, keep pushing, and keep making a difference. See you next time.